What's going on, guys? Welcome to Amigos Code. In this full course, I'm going to teach you exactly everything you need to know about Spring Security. I'm going to teach you how you are going to be able to secure your applications, right? Security is one of those topics that none of us has a clear and full understanding of how it works, but yet we need to secure our applications in one way or another. In this course, you are going to fully learn how to use Spring Security. You're going to learn about cross-site request forgery, roles, users and permissions, basic authentication, form-based authentication, and JWTs. And so that you know, there will be a lot to cover, but the good thing is we're simply going to focus on coding. I don't want to bombard you with the presentations because I don't think that's the right way for you to learn. Obviously, I've got some diagrams to show you exactly how things connect to each other, but we will code a lot in this course. So what I want from you is to go ahead and practice as I teach, because that's the best way for you to learn any new concept, framework, technology that you come across. If you get stuck, go ahead and drop me a message and I'll be more than happy to assist. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, go ahead and subscribe right now. Otherwise, let's go ahead and learn everything you need to know about Spring Security. Alright, for this course, you will get the source code for every single section at the end. So that means that if you are stuck, you can simply use a git checkout command and then the actual name of the section. And that way you can get the source code and follow along in case you get stuck, for example. And also, as I always say, make sure to practice as I teach, because that's the best way for you to learn anything. And without further ado, let's get started. All right, let's go ahead and kick off this course by navigating into start.spring.io. And in this website, we can bootstrap our Spring Boot application. So as you can see, this page has a Halloween theme, and this is because I'm recording this video just the day before Halloween. But if you watch it after Halloween, then you shouldn't see, you know, the spider and the black theme. So you should see everything white. But I think this is really, really nice. So in this website, we can bootstrap the application. So go ahead and bootstrap this application with Maven, and then select Java, and then the version, pick anything above 2. So I'm going to pick the default, which is 2.2.0. Now for the group, leave it as it is, and then artifact, leave it as it is as well. You can change those according to your needs, but for now I'm going to leave them as they are. Then I'm going to click on options, and then right here you can see that you can pretty much just pick a Java version as well as the actual packaging. So for the Java version, I'm going to go ahead and pick Java 11 right here. So I haven't got Java 13 installed, that's why I'm picking 11. But if you have 13, go ahead and experiment, and I think it should just work. But for being safe, and if you want to follow along, go ahead and pick 11 or 8, and 12 as well will also work if you see that option. Next, right here, you can see that we can select a bunch of dependencies. So I'm going to click that, and you can see that we have a bunch of dependencies right here. So because we are learning about Spring Security, you can see right here, this is a dependency that we will need in a second. We have to choose this dependency, but not now. So I'm going to show you first how to spin up an application without security, and then we will manually install this dependency right here. So for now, what we need to pretty much just install is the Spring Web. So this allows us to build applications with Spring MVC using Apache Tomcat as a default embedded container. So go ahead and select that and then generate the project. Ooh, this is nice. I can see a ghost kind of like this. So I don't know if you'll have the chance to see this, but maybe not, but this is really, really cool. And I'm even scared right now. So I'm just going to generate the project. Now I'm going to open it up in my desktop. And if I collapse this, and now what I'm going to do is simply extract it and then delete this zip folder right here. And there we go. Now we have this demo folder. Next, let's go ahead and open up this folder with IntelliJ. For this course, the IDE that I'm going to use is IntelliJ. And if you want to learn more about IntelliJ, check out my website for this course, IntelliJ Developer Guide. And in this free course, I teach you everything you need to know about IntelliJ and why you should really use IntelliJ if you want to become a real software developer, because IntelliJ allows you to write code really fast and you can focus on what matters instead of you wasting time with IDEs such as Eclipse or NetBeans. So go ahead and take this course and I highly suggest you. So you can watch this intro where I talk about exactly what IntelliJ is and why you should take it. So once you have IntelliJ installed, go ahead and click on open and then go to where the demo folder is and then open up the pom.xml and then as project, and it's resolving the dependencies, and there we go. So if I put this full screen, there we go. So now you can see that we have this folder right here called demo, and within this folder we have the pom.xml. So if I open it up right here, this simply contains the actual dependencies for our application. So remember that we selected this one right here, so Spring Boot Startup Web. So this is what we selected from Spring Initializer, and later on we're going to be adding the Spring Security, but for now I just want to show you how to get an application up and running without Spring Boot Security. Now if I close this and then open up source, main, and then Java, and then within this package we have demo application right here. So if I open it up, you can see that we have this main method right here. So also, if you want to learn about Spring Boot on my website, I've got this course right here which I highly recommend you taking, and in this course I teach you how to use Spring Boot. So it's the essential training, but I go over how to create controllers, how to create services, how to use dependency injection, how to switch implementations by implementing to an interface, and a bunch of other things. So I highly suggest you to take this course if you haven't used Spring Boot. If you have used Spring Boot, I've got this advanced course right here. So this is the full stack web development, and this is where we go in depth into databases, flyway migrations, connecting to real databases using Docker and Amazon AWS, build configurations, deploying it to real users, exceptions, implementing a user interface using React, and a bunch of other things. So I highly suggest you to take this course as well. And to be honest, this is what most students do take. So go ahead and enroll to either one of those courses in order to understand all of this if you haven't never done Spring Boot, or if you're not really familiar with Spring Boot. So right now, let's go ahead and simply run this main method. So let's go ahead and run the main method. And this just simply will ensure that everything is up and running fine. And you can see that right here. So we have no errors. And right here, you can see that Tomcat initialize it with port right here, 8080. This means that everything is working fine. And next, let's go ahead and build a controller or an API that clients can submit requests. All right, let's go ahead and build an API that will allow users to retrieve students. So let's go ahead and collapse this, and let's go ahead within the main package, create another package, and let's call this as student. And within that package, let's go ahead and create Java class, and let's name it as student and then controller. Now I've got typo right here, so let me just fix that. So this should be con and then controller, just like that. And then let's annotate this class with at and then rest and then controller, and then at and then request and then mapping. And right here, let's simply go ahead and say API /v1 and then students. And let's go ahead now and create a method. So right here, let's simply say public, and then this will return actually a student, and simply say get and then student right here. And what we're going to do here is simply pass the actual student ID. So let me go ahead and say integer and then student and then ID. And what we're going to do is the following. So this ID right here, we will get it from the path. So I want to say at and then get mapping. And then within the get mapping, I'm going to have a path. And then within this path, I'm going to add / and then student and then ID. Now, the way that I do get this student ID is simply by saying at and then path variable. And then the path variable that I want is student and then ID. So this student ID is this one. And in fact, I don't need that /. Now we need to create this class right here called student. So I'm going to go to the main package and then create a class called student. And then right here, let's keep it super simple. So private final integer and then student and then ID. And let's also have a private final and then string student and then name. Let's add these to constructor. There we go. And let's have some getters just like that. And if I put this on a new line, and you can see that this model right here, so this class called student, contains the ID as well as the actual name. Now if I go back to student controller, you can see that the error went away. Now let me go ahead and simply have a private and then a static and then final, and then let's have a list right here. And within this list, I'm going to have students. And let me simply name this as students equals to arrays dot as list. And let's add few students. So new student, and let's add ID 1 and then James and then Bond. Let's have another student. So new and then student ID 2. Oops, not string. This must be an integer. And then this will be Maria and then Jones. And let's add a final student right here. So new and then student and then Anna. Oops, so this would be 3 actually. And then Anna and then Smith, just like that. So we have 3 students right here. So what we're going to do right here is simply say return. So let's simply say return and then students and then dot and then stream. So we're going to stream and then dot and then filter. and we have the student right here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the actual student ID, so the one that we get from the client, dot, and then equals, and then the actual student dot, and then get ID. So if this is the case, I'm going to say dot find first, otherwise, so or, and then else, I'm going to throw. So right here you can pretty much just throw a custom exception, but for now let me simply say illegal, and then state exception, and then student, and then plus student ID. Let me put this full screen so you can see exactly, and then plus does not exist. There we go. So this is using some streams, and also if you want to learn more about streams, go ahead and check my website for learning how to use Java streams. So now what we're going to do is let's go ahead and restart the application. So I'm going to stop and rerun, and this should be 3 right here. So Anna Smith. So now if I open up my web browser, and then if I go to localhost 8080, and then API v1, and then students, and then / and then 1, you can see that we have student ID, and then this is James Bond. Now if I do student and then 2, you can see that we have Maria Jones. So this is all for now, and if you have had troubles getting this far, go ahead and drop me a message. But now we have an API that we can start securing with Spring Boot security. Let's go ahead and add Spring security into our project and start securing things. So let's go back to IntelliJ and go ahead and open up the pom.xml. So inside of this pom.xml, this is where we're going to add the Spring security. Now go ahead and simply add a new dependency, and for the artifact, go ahead and simply say spring dash and then boot dash starter, and then dash, guess what, security. There we go. And this will come from org.springboot, just like this one right here, and then enable auto imports, and there you go. So now let's go ahead and restart the application. Now let's go back to our API. And remember, before we had this endpoint right here, which gave us Maria Jones. Now, if I go ahead and refresh this page, you can see that. So if I put this smaller, you can see that we have this form right here. And to be honest, we didn't have to do anything. So the only thing that we did was to add the Spring Boot security dependency, and then we get this form-based authentication right here, right out of the box. And this is the reason why Spring Boot security is awesome. So you can see that we did only added the security dependency, and then without having to configure anything, we have form-based authentication, and this is really, really cool. So we have username and password right here. So the way that we get the password is from the console. So right here, you should see that we have this using generated security password. So go ahead and grab this, Command C, go back, and then right here, go ahead and simply say user as the username. And then the password is the one that we've copied from the console. I'm going to paste that in. Now go ahead and sign in, and you can see that now we get the original payload that we were expecting. And this is because now we are signed in. So Spring Boot, it's already doing the security work for us without us having to do anything. And this is really, really awesome. Next, let's go ahead and learn how to use basic authentication with Spring Boot security. Alright, so we've installed Spring Security and we have this form right here. So we didn't implement any of this, and this is pretty much what Spring Boot Security gives us right out of the box. Now, what you are seeing here is form-based authentication. So this is used widely throughout the internet, and you've seen many websites that allow you to sign in by simply using your username and password. So right here you can see that we can provide the username and then the password. So right here you can see that Spring Boot generates a random password, and I'm going to show you exactly how we're going to create users, set passwords. But for now, I just want to teach you and also give you an overview of form-based authentication before we move on. So I'm going to copy this password, and then the default user is user, and then paste the actual password. So what I'm going to do is actually, before I submit the request, I'm going to inspect on the console, and right here go to network, and I'm going to sign in. So you can see that we have the payload. So this is the actual JSON blob that we saw previously, right? So this is Maria, and if I do 1, we've got James Bond, and if I do 2, we have Maria, oh actually 3, so 3, we have Anna Smith. So currently we are logged in, right? So the actual original request was / and then login, right? So if I try that again, you can see that I go back to the sign in page, or actually login page, and we didn't implement none of this. So currently we're still logged in, and if I go back, you can see that this still works, right? So if I want to log out, so if I want to kill this session, I can simply go to the actual root URL and then simply type log and then out. And you can see that it says, are you sure? And I'm going to log out. And you can see that you have been signed out. Now, if I try to access the API, so API and then v1 /students / and then 1, you can see that I need to log in again. So let's log in once more. So user and then the password right here. And what I'm going to do is right here, you can see on the right hand side. So I've got the inspect panel open, and under network, you can see all the requests which are being made. So what I'm going to do now is simply sign in. And right here, you can see that we have this login request. So I'm going to click on it, and you can see that we have some details about the request that we sent to our server. So you can see that this was a post, the status code, and some response headers, request headers. But what I want to show you really is the actual payload which is sent to our backend. So you can see that the username is user and then the password. And also you have this CSRF, which I'm going to explain you later what it is. But for now, this is what gets sent to our backend. And we haven't configured anything. And Spring Boot Security handles everything. So it makes sure that the user exists, it checks the password, and if all of those conditions are met, then we can log in. So I just want you to realize the power of Spring Boot Security. It's really awesome, and you should definitely use it in your own projects. So form-based authentication is what you see all over the internet, but we also have other forms of authentication. So in this course, we're going to cover basic auth, and then I'm going to show you exactly in detail the form-based authentication. So this one right here that you are looking at. So if I say log out, So you can see that this is the form-based authentication. We're going to cover this much more in detail later on. And then towards the end of this course, I'm going to show you exactly how to use JWTs or JWTs. So this was a quick overview of form-based authentication. Next, let's go ahead and learn about basic authentication. But as I said, later on, we're going to learn more about form-based authentication with Spring Boot Security. All right, let's go ahead and learn about how basic authentication, or simply basic auth, works. So this is widely used as well, but there are some limitations between basic auth and form-based authentications and JWTs, but I want to teach you first basic auth because it's the simplest of all, and then show you exactly how form-based works, and then JWT, which is a really nice alternative instead of basic or form-based authentication. So with basic auth, you have the client right here, and the client wants to access some requests on a server, right? So it wants to issue either a GET request, put, deletes, so on and so forth. So what the client initially does, and the client can be pretty much anything, right? It could be a web app, it could be your backend calling another API, or it could be an Android or iOS app. It could literally be anything. So what the client does is the client sends a request, right? So let's say that a client wants to view some data and then sends a request. Well, with basic auth, if you just send a request, you will get a 401 status code, meaning unauthorized from the server. And this is because with basic auth, you need to specify the username and password inside of the request header as base64. So every single request that you send to the server, you need to specify the username and password. And this is encoded as base64 inside of the request header. Then the server does some validations, whether the username exists. If the username exists, checks the password, and then if the password matches the one that the server knows about, then it sends a 200 status code with whatever the client has requested. So as you can see, this is very simple to understand, and to be honest, a lot of people still use it for accessing APIs. Not so much, for example, if you have to have a form on your website where people log in providing the username and password, because right here you can see that the client has to send every single time the password. And if you have a modern application, you don't want the user, for example, right here in this web app, for example, you don't want the user to send the username and password for every single request, right? So this is usually good when you are accessing external APIs. So let's go ahead and learn exactly how to implement basic auth with Spring Boot. Let's go ahead and change from form-based authentication to basic auth, where we have to specify the username and password for every single request. So I'm going to go back to IntelliJ. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to collapse this. And right here, let's go ahead and create a new package. And right here, I'm going to call this as security. So this will be the security package. And inside, let's go ahead and create a new class, and I'm going to call this as application security and then config. So this class has to be annotated with @ and then configuration, and then we have to annotate as well with @ and then enable and then web security. So by doing this, this will be the place where we will configure everything that has to do with security for our application. Now, right here, we need to extend a class, and we have to extend web security configure adapter. So right here, you see that we've just extended this class, And if I press Control and then O, or actually Command O, you can see that we can override few methods right here. And to be honest, there are not many, but we can override some methods. So the one that I'm going to teach you first is this one right here. So configure, and this one takes the HTTP security. So select that one and then simply say OK. And right here, this is how we're going to secure things. So instead of super, go ahead and delete this line. Now inside, I'm going to use this HTTP right here, and I'm going to say HTTP, and then right here, I'm going to press enter and then simply say dot, and then I want to authorize requests followed by dot any request must be authenticated. And then right here, I'm going to say that and I want to use basic authentication. So this is HTTP and then basic. And there we go. So this is our new configuration. So right here, we are saying that we want to authorize requests. Any requests must be authenticated, i.e. the client must specify the username and password. And the mechanism that we want to enforce the authenticity of a client is by using basic authentication. So HTTP basic. So let's go ahead and restart the server and give that a go. So I'm going to restart the server. And right here, you can see that we have this password, and then go back to my web page. And right here before, remember, we had by default form-based authentication. Now what I'm going to do is simply reload this page, and you can see that now we have this pop-up right here. And this is what exactly is basic auth from a web browser. So again, let's go ahead and pretty much just enter the username as user, and then the password, so the one that I've just copied, and then sign in. And you can see that this application has no explicit mapping for /. So basically right here, what I need is to go to API and then v1 students, and then I want to get number 2. And you can see that now I do have Maria Jones. So you can see that it is really straightforward. Basic authentication. It's very simple to use. You just need the username and password, and that's it. Now, one of the drawbacks of basic auth is that you can't log out. So I can't simply, go here and then simply say log and then out. So there is no way for you to log out. You can see that we have a white label error page. So there is no way for you to log out because the username and password is sent on every single request, right? And for every single request, the server has to validate whether the username and password is correct. So this is pretty much how you use basic auth. So let me actually go back to the API, and basically within the browser we get this pop-up. So in fact, let me go ahead and restart the server so you can see the pop-up once more. So if I refresh, you can see that this is the actual pop-up. So next, let me go ahead and show you exactly how to use, for example, a client where you're going to be able to specify the username and password inside of the request headers. Alright, for this part of this video, go ahead and download Postman, and Postman allows us to test our APIs. So because we don't have, for example, a mobile client or a web client, we can trigger requests as if we were using some of those clients. So it's pretty much really useful to test your stuff locally before you send it to an environment where real applications or clients use it. So once you have Postman installed, go ahead and open it up. And right here, you can see that in this user interface, we can issue some requests. So right here, you can see that we can issue get, post, put, delete, copy, and some other request types. So right here, we're going to send. So let me actually show you. So remember, so right here, if I put this on the foreground, so like that. So before we were using the web browser, and by default, the web browser shows you this model right here where you have to specify the username and password. So right here, you can see that it's actually spinning until we provide the username and password. So often, you know, this is not a great user interface. So every time you want to access a resource, you have to enter your username and password. So what you would do is within the actual request, right? So if you are using, for example, an Android application or a React or an iOS app, you simply bake the username and password inside of the request headers. So right here, go ahead and select get. And we're going to issue an HTTP request to local and then host 8080/API/v1 and then students and then /2. So right here, I'm going to send this request and you should guess what's going to happen. So right here, you can see that I'm not authorized. So you can see that this 401 request is what I've showed you before, right? So this is the 401 request returned by the server. So now let's go ahead and add the username and password inside of the request header. So right here, go ahead and you can see that the type, so right here, no auth, go ahead and select basic auth. So now go ahead and say user. And then for the password, if I open up IntelliJ, you can see that this is the password. Grab that, go back and then paste that in. And I can go ahead and simply send the request. And you can see that this time we do get our JSON payload right here. So what I want to show you actually is the actual headers. So go to headers. And right here, you can see that the headers includes the authorization right here, and then basic, and then right here. So this right here is a username and password as base64. So remember, so right here, I said base64 username and password. So if you have any questions on this, go ahead and drop me a message. Next, let me go ahead and show you how you're going to whitelist some URL paths using ant matchers. All right, let me go ahead and show you exactly how you're going to be able to whitelist some URLs with security. So right here, we simply have to provide the username and password. So let me go ahead and simply say user and then password. So right here, oh, actually, I need to get it from here. Just like that. Go back, user, and then paste the password. And you can see that I'm in. So there are times that you might have, for example, an index.html right here, and you want this to be public. So currently we have a 404, meaning that there is nothing to be served right here. So let me actually go back to IntelliJ. And if I open up the project tab, open up resources, and inside of static, go ahead and create a new file. Simply say index.html, and then simply say h1, and then simply say hello, spring, and then boot security. And if I restart the server, and then right here, so if I get this, and then right here, so if I refresh, so let me actually say user and then the password, sign in, and you can see that we have a low Spring Boot security. So let's say that this is the actual main page that you want to whitelist for every single user. So every single user whether they are logged in or not, they should be able to get access to this page instead of having to enter their username and password. So it's what happened, right? So if I restart the server, so right here, so if I refresh this, you can see that I have to enter my username and password. So the way that we can whitelist, specific URLs with Spring Security is if I go back to IntelliJ and open up the application security config. So right here, so if I collapse this, so right here, we can simply say after authorized requests, say .ant and then matchers. And then within ant matchers, we can specify some patterns. So right here, I can say that, for example, I want to allow, requests going to the root as well as the index. So anything that has an index will be whitelisted. I can also whitelist some CSS, right? So go ahead and say /CSS/ and then any CSS, and the same with JavaScript. So /JS/ and then star. Now we have an error, and that is because we need to say these patterns right here, we want to permit. So dot and then permit all. Now, if I restart the server and go back to my web browser, if I cancel out of this and now reload the page, you can see that I don't have to specify the username and password. Again, if I reload, you can see that I don't need to specify the credentials. Now, as soon as I try to access API and then v1 and then students and then 2, enter, you can see that now I have to specify the username and password. So let me actually grab the password, go back, and then user, paste the password, and you can see that now I can access this URL. So this is how you pretty much whitelist some URLs. So if you have any questions on this, go ahead and drop me a message. Next, let me go ahead and show you how to create users with a predefined username and password. In this section, let's go ahead and learn about users. So currently, when we start our backend, Spring Boot Security gives us a default user, which the username is user, and then the password is this random user. And this user right here, it's stored inside of an in-memory database. So let me show you again if you don't remember. So right here, if I start the application, there we go. You can see that using generated security password, and this is a random UID. So this is this default user. Now, obviously, when you develop your own applications, you want to have a bunch of users, i.e. users signing up to your application so that you can then authenticate them as you need. So usually we would have something like this. So you'd have a bunch of users, and then you'd actually store them inside of a real database. So in this case right here, you can see that it's a Postgres database. And if you want to learn more about Postgres and SQL, go ahead and check my website for a course where I teach all of this for free. So the idea is that you have a bunch of users and then you want to store them inside of a database. So right here, you can see that whenever we restart the server, we lose this user's password. So with a real database, that won't be the case anymore. So with users, there are a few things that we need to learn about users. So one is that a user must have a username, and this username must be unique. And then it must have a password the password must be encoded, because we don't want to be storing passwords as plain text, because that's a really bad idea. And then with users, you can define roles, and this is how you're going to control what endpoints they should be allowed and what they can perform inside of those endpoints using authorities. So this is optional, but it's highly recommended that you use authorities. But we're going to learn about this roles and authorities throughout this course in detail, and a bunch of other things that I'm going to show you later in this course. So for now, let's go ahead and create a user. So we're going to create a user, and then we're going to define the actual username and password and still use an in-memory database. But obviously I'm going to show you how to store users into a real database. Next, let's go ahead and create a user. Alright, so to create our very first user, let's go ahead and override one method. So I'm going to press Command O, and the method that I want you to override is this one right here, user details service. So right here, after override, go ahead and simply say add and then bean. So this will be instantiated for us. And if I put this full screen, so this user details service is how you retrieve your users from your database. So right here, I'm going to simply define a user, but ideally what we will do later is to retrieve a user from the database. So right here, let me actually go ahead and remove this return super user details service. And what I'm going to do here is simply say user, and make sure to pick the one from Spring Framework, and then dot, and then builder, and then go ahead and simply say username. So let's define the actual username. So this will be Anna and then Smith, just like that. And then the password, dot, and then password. So go ahead and simply say password. And then finally, go ahead and specify roles. So right here, let's go ahead and simply define one role, and the role will be student. So she is a student. So this is Anna Smith right here. So now let me go ahead and extract this to a variable, and you can see that I do have a user right here. So user, or actually Anna and then Smith user, just like that. Now what I'm going to do is actually click on user details service, and you can see that this is an interface. So right here, you can see that I can see which classes do implement this interface. So if I click on it, you can see that I do have caching user details service, in-memory details manager, JDBC DAO implement, and then, user detail manager, and so on and so forth. So the one that we are going to use is this one right here, in-memory details manager. So if I go back, and right here, let's go ahead and simply say return new in-memory details manager. And this takes, you can see that it takes a collection of users or a series of users. So right here, let's simply go ahead and say Anna, or actually Anna and then Smith user. And you can see that we have an error, and this is because we are using a builder right here, and we need to say dot and then build. And you can see that now this is no longer this builder, right? So if I remove that, so let me actually grab this name, and that shouldn't be a builder. So if I refactor this, Anna Smith and then user. So there we go. So now you can see that we have this username, Anna Smith, the password is password, and then student is the actual role. So roles and then student. And this internally will be role underscore and then student, just like that. So this is how Spring Security understands this student and then uses throughout the application for accessing some resources, which I'm going to show you exactly how to use it. And then we build it, and then we have this user details. So let me go back to the actual diagram. So right here, remember I said that the password must be encoded. So if we try and run this, and then let's go ahead and try and access this API, Anna, and then Smith, and then the password is password, sign in. You can see that that didn't work. If I go back to IntelliJ, you can see that we have an error, and you can see that there is no password encoder. And that's what we're going to learn next. All right, so let's go ahead and define the password encoder that can be used for encoding this password right here. So let me collapse this and then expand the tab, and right here inside of the security package, let's go ahead and create a new class and simply say password and then config. So right here, annotate this with add and then configuration, and we're going to create a public and then password and then encoder, and simply name this as password encoder. So right here, this password encoder, so this is an interface, and this interface has three methods. So encode, so this takes a series of characters and then encodes the password into a random character. And then we have the matches, right? And then we have Boolean upgrade encoding. So this is actually what we are interested, right? So this encode right here, and this is what Spring Boot Security uses internally to encode the passwords. So the most famous password encoder, and you can see that this is an interface right here. So the most famous password encoder out there is this one. So I'm going to say return and then B and then crypt password encoder. And obviously I need to say new, and right here we can specify the strength inside of the constructor. So I'm going to choose 10 right here. So this is the strength on how to encode the passwords. So there we go. So I'm going to leave a link on bcrypt so you can go ahead and read more about it, but this is the most popular password encoder out there. Now let's go ahead and simply annotate this with add and then bean. There we go. Now let's go back to application security config, and inside of the constructor, so let's go ahead and simply say private final and then password encoder. There we go. And let's auto wire. So we're going to auto wire this guy. So this password encoder will be this one right here. So let me actually open up password config. Will be this one, which is bcrypt. Now this solves the problem. So actually this is not doing anything just yet. So let me comment that out. So if I restart the server, there we go. If I now try and access right here, so Anna Smith and then password, sign in, you can see that this didn't work. And if I go back, you can see that we have a message right here. So log line saying encoded password does not look like bcrypt. So this is why I wanted to inject the password encoder right here. So if I uncomment that, now when I define the password, I can go ahead and simply say password encoder dot and then encode and then the actual password. Now if I restart the server, there we go. If I go back to Chrome and Anna and then Smith and then password, and then sign in. You can see that it works. Now just let me reload the page so you can see that it's working. And there we go. We've successfully managed to encode our passwords. So just to show you exactly what this password looks like, so if I put breakpoint right here and stop this, and then pretty much just run this in debug mode. There we go. Now I'm going to press this evaluate expression. So password encoder dot encode, and then simply say password inside, and then evaluate. You can see that now the password looks like this. So this is the random sequence, which makes it really hard for an attacker to know that this random sequence right here is password. So this is the actual password right here, right? So make sure to always use a password encoder. And to be honest, like Spring Boot Security won't let you proceed because it wants you to follow the right patterns to secure your applications. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on. Alright, it's time for us to learn about roles and authorities, or simply permissions. So I think permissions is a better way instead of using authorities. So a role is simply a high-level view of all the users that you have in your system. So the idea is that for a specific user, you assign a role. So the role is just the high level view, and then you have authorities or permissions. So you'll see a lot of people say that this as authorities, but I think that this should be permissions because it's easy for you to reason about. So let me show you the actual diagram, and this will make complete sense to you. So right here, you can see that I do have a role called admin. And then these ones right here, so student column read, courses write, student write, and courses read, these are the permissions. So you can see that the role is the high level view, and then within a role you have a set of permissions that a role has. So right here, so let me show you. So right here, so you can see that if I make this smaller, so right here you can see that these are the permissions. So these ones, course write, read, student write, and student read. So these are permissions. And then admin, so the higher level is the actual role. And create another role called student. So right here, and currently we have a role assigned to our student, but right here you can see that the student, so the student role doesn't have courses write. So a student may be able to view the student information. It might be able to update its details, and also it might be the list of available courses in your system. But what a student cannot do is to update course information, because that's really an admin job. So you can see that within this role student, it doesn't have the capability to modify courses. And this brings us to the point of how we use roles within our system. Well, it's very straightforward. So these roles and permissions allows us to secure our APIs. So for example, you might have an API which only can be accessible by admins, or you may have an API which might be only accessible by students. So let's go ahead and actually create a second user. So we're going to create an admin user and then secure some APIs. Alright, so right within IntelliJ, right here inside of our user detail service, let's go ahead and create another user. So simply use the user and then